When my son-in-law's truck turned into the driveway, I was already in the kitchen with the lights on, watching through the window above the sink. He got out slowly, stood in the driveway looking at the house the way a man looks at something he thought he owned but isn't sure about anymore. My truck was visible through the open garage door. The kitchen light painted a yellow square on the front lawn. I'd left both visible, deliberately. My daughter stepped out from the passenger side. She saw the garage, saw the light, grabbed his arm and said something I couldn't hear. I walked to the front door and opened it before they reached the porch steps. "You're back early," I said. "I've been waiting." My son-in-law's face went through several expressions fast. Confusion first, then recalculation. Then something underneath both of those that I recognized from 32 years of running a construction business, the look of a man whose plan has just come apart. Let me back up 11 days. My name is Harold, and I'm 64 years old. I spent 3 decades building homes across the Willamette Valley. Framing, foundation, finish work, everything in between. I sold the company 4 years ago when my wife Eleanor was first diagnosed. Used the time to be with her instead of at job sites. She passed 2 years ago this March. Breast cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end. We had 41 years together, and I'd give back the sale price and every quiet morning since, if I could have one more afternoon sitting with her in the garden. After Eleanor died, the house felt enormous. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a workshop in the back, a garden she'd spent 20 years building. My daughter called from Portland more often, worried about me being alone. When she asked, 8 months after the funeral, whether she and her husband might stay with me temporarily while they sorted out some financial trouble, I said yes, without hesitation. She's my daughter. The house had rooms standing empty. That seemed like the right thing to do. Her husband had been charming since the day she brought him home at 26. Confident, well-dressed, good at reading a room. He shook hands firmly, laughed at my jokes, and called me Dad within the first year of their marriage. I liked him then. I trusted him the way you trust someone you've watched be good to your child for 12 years. They moved in 18 months ago. 2 suitcases became a bedroom full of boxes. His temporary job search stretched into months. He handled the cable bill, dealt with the yard, drove Eleanor's old Subaru to the grocery store on Wednesdays. Small contributions that added up to presents. He made himself indispensable the way a contractor does, solving enough small problems that no one questions when he walks into a room carrying a clipboard. I should have questioned more. 6 weeks before the trip, my son-in-law sat down across from me at the kitchen table after dinner. He had his laptop open. My daughter was loading the dishwasher behind us. "Dad, I've been thinking about your estate documents," he said. He had a way of starting sentences with, "I've been thinking," that made his ideas sound like gifts. Eleanor set up a living trust years ago, but there are some gaps. Oregon has this great option now, a transfer on death deed. You record it, and if something ever happens to you, the house goes directly to your daughter without going through probate. Saves months of legal hassle, thousands in fees. He turned the laptop toward me. A document on screen. Standard-looking header. A lot of legal language in small type. He scrolled through it quickly. "It's just a protective measure," he said. "Doesn't affect anything while you're alive. Only kicks in if you're gone." My daughter dried her hands on a dish towel. Came to look over my shoulder. "Makes sense, right, Dad? We've been meaning to sort this out." I looked at the document. The words blurred slightly. I'd left my reading glasses upstairs. The language looked official. He'd said, boilerplate, just protection. I trusted him. He'd lived in my house for 18 months. He called me Dad. I signed with the electronic pad he'd brought to the table. He closed the laptop. Thanked me. Said he'd have it recorded with the county next week. I never saw a printed copy, never asked for one. That was the last in a long line of mistakes that began the moment I stopped asking questions. The trip was his idea, presented as my daughter's. "We want to take you somewhere, Dad. You haven't been anywhere since before Mom got sick. A week in Cancun Beach, good food, no schedule. You deserve it." My daughter said this over Sunday breakfast, eyes bright, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. She meant it. I believe that even now, my son-in-law handled all the bookings. Flights from Eugene to Houston to Cancun, a hotel in the hotel zone, excursion packages. He printed the itinerary and posted it on the refrigerator. Told me to pack light. The first 5 days were good. We ate fresh fish at outdoor restaurants. Took a day trip to Chichen Itza in a rented van. My daughter swam in the hotel pool for hours like she was 17 again, and I sat in the shade drinking coffee and watching her and felt something close to peace for the first time in 2 years. On the night before departure, I noticed them whispering in the hotel hallway. They separated when I came around the corner. Just going over checkout logistics, my son-in-law said. Smooth and immediate. I believed him. Departure morning, Terminal 3 at Cancun International Airport. We checked our bags, passed security, reached our gate. Our flight to Houston boarded in 90 minutes. My daughter sat reading something on her phone. My son-in-law paced near the windows. He stopped in front of me. Dad, there's a good coffee place back past the main security checkpoint, the one we passed coming in. You know how bad gate coffee is. Would you grab us 3? He pressed 2 folded bills into my hand without looking at me. Get yourself a pastry. Take your time. I looked at my daughter. She was already looking back at her phone. I took the bills, stood, left my light jacket draped on the seat beside her. It was warm in the terminal. My wallet was in that jacket. My phone was in that jacket. I'd gotten careless about keeping them on my person the way you do when you're with family and feel safe. A week of beach days had made me soft. $35 in my front pants pocket. Cash I always carried there from 3 decades of walking job sites where a coffee run happened without warning. That habit, at least, I hadn't lost. The coffee place was farther than I remembered. I ordered 3 coffees, 2 pastries, stood at the counter, watching a slow barista work. Maybe 12 minutes passed. Maybe 15. I carried the cardboard tray back through the terminal, toward our gate. The seats were empty. My jacket was still folded on the chair where my daughter had been sitting. I grabbed it immediately, reached into the inner pocket. Empty. Wallet gone. Reached into the front zip pocket. Phone gone. I set down the coffee tray. My hands were steady. I've been in situations where a building failed inspection, and a crew of 20 was waiting on materials that hadn't arrived, where I had to stand in front of a client and explain why their home wasn't ready. Steady hands in bad situations, it's something you build over decades or you don't survive in this business. I went to the gate counter. The airline employee typed, checked her screen. Your party took an earlier standby flight to Houston 40 minutes ago, she said. They've already departed. Did they leave anything for me? A message? She shook her head. Her expression said she was sorry and also that she had seen situations like this before. I walked back to the empty seats, sat down, counted what I had. $35. 2 coffees going cold, my jacket with empty pockets, a boarding pass that meant nothing now because my ID had been in my wallet. I let myself sit with it for 2 full minutes. Not surprise, somewhere underneath the shock, I think I'd known something was wrong since the hallway, whispering the night before. What I felt was colder than surprise. It was the particular clarity that comes when you finally see a structure you've been staring at for months and understand for the first time how it was actually built. Then I stood up and started working the problem. Airport security directed me to a supervisor who sent me to an assistance desk, who gave me a card with the address of the U.S. consular agency in Cancun's hotel zone, 6 kilometers from the airport. A taxi, paid with 22 of my $35, left me at a low building with an American flag mounted above the entrance. The officer inside was named David Chen, mid-30s, efficient, the kind of calm that comes from spending years dealing with people in exactly my situation. He listened without interrupting, wrote things down, asked me 3 questions when I finished. Was any travel documentation voluntarily surrendered to another person? No, it was taken from my jacket without my knowledge. Have you filed a police report? Not yet. Do you have any way to verify your identity? I gave him my social security number, my date of birth, my home address, my former company's EIN from memory, 32 years of using it on every contract I signed. He typed, checked a screen, looked back at me. We can issue an emergency travel document, he said. Standard processing is 72 hours. Given your circumstances, I can push this to 48. There's a fee. He paused. We have an emergency assistance fund that can defer payment until you're home. I told him about the document I'd signed 6 weeks ago. He stopped typing. Contact a property attorney the moment you reach Oregon, he said. I help you get home. What happens after that is for you to handle, but do it immediately. I filed the police report the next morning at the tourist assistance office downtown, through a translator. My son-in-law was named. The report documented the theft of my wallet, identification, and phone from my personal effects at the airport. The officer asked whether my family member had done this deliberately. I said yes. He stamped the form without expression. Back at the consular agency on the 48th hour, David Chen handed me the emergency travel document, an envelope with $400 from the assistance fund, and a form to repay it after reaching home. He shook my hand. You're not the first person to come through that door, he said, but you're among the calmest. I'd spent 2 nights at a small guest house near the consulate, $30 a night. The owner, a woman named Rosa, brought me coffee in the mornings without asking whether I wanted it. Her husband had been treated badly by family once, she said. Some things don't need explaining. I found an internet cafe at the end of her block, $2 for 30 minutes. I booked a flight Cancun to Houston to Portland, one way, $340, charged to a credit card number I knew from memory. My old business account, the one I'd kept since selling the company, the one I'd never mentioned to my son-in-law because I'd learned a long time ago that you don't put every card on the table at once. $400 in assistance funds, minus $60 for 2 nights, minus $2 for internet, minus $38 for taxi, and other incidentals. The math worked out with just enough room to spare. I boarded on day 4, middle seat, Houston connection. Through the window, I watched Cancun shrink and disappear. My daughter and son-in-law had booked return flights on day 9 of the trip. I had a 5-day lead. My neighbor Walt was in his front yard when my Uber pulled up. Retired after 22 years with the Lane County Sheriff's Department, Walt Simmons had lived next door for 15 years. He looked up from his roses, saw me stepping out of the car with nothing but a light jacket and a paper travel document, and understood immediately that something was wrong. Harold, Walt, you're early. They left without me. He came across the lawn without asking for details, a quality of people who spent 2 decades dealing with what happens after things go badly. He walked me to my door, waited while I retrieved the spare key from the false bottom of a ceramic planter. Eleanor had kept on the side porch and stood in the entryway while I moved through the house. I knew before I'd finished the first room. My father's 1962 Martin D. 28 guitar hanging on its bracket in the study for 40 years was gone. Eleanor's pearl set, 3 pieces she'd worn at our wedding and every anniversary after, gone from the velvet tray in the bedroom. My grandfather's pocket watch, the one I'd kept in the glass case in the living room, gone. A box of silver dollars my father had collected over 30 years, gone from the closet shelf. In the study, centered on my desk, as if placed there to be found, lay a manila envelope. I opened it. Quitclaim deed, my address, grantor, Harold Briggs, grantee, Derek Hayworth. Consideration, love and affection. Date, 7 weeks ago, 1 week before he'd brought the laptop to my kitchen table. My signature at the bottom, notarized. I read it twice, read it a 3rd time. A transfer on death deed, he'd said. Standard protective measure, only applies if you're gone. A quitclaim deed transfers ownership immediately. The moment it's recorded, the property changes hands. My son-in-law had owned my house on paper since the day after I signed. Walt was still in the doorway. I carried the document to him. He read it. His expression didn't change the same controlled stillness I'd noticed in him since Eleanor's funeral, when he'd stood at the back of the church, and afterward shook my hand and said nothing at all, which was exactly right. Wallet and phone, he said. Took them at the airport. He handed back the document. Can I borrow your landline? He called someone I didn't ask who and spoke quietly for 3 minutes. When he hung up, he turned to me. You need a property attorney in the morning. I have a name. Tonight, we document what's missing and change the locks. Walt drove to the hardware store for new deadbolts, while I photographed every empty space in the house. The guitar bracket, the velvet tray with its indentations where Eleanor's pearls had rested for years, the glass case with the watch missing, the closet shelf with its rectangle of undisturbed dust where the silver dollar box had always sat. I used Walt's phone. 61 photographs before I was done. I called my bank from the landline, verified no changes to the account, no authorized users added. My son-in-law had taken objects, things he could carry, and convert to cash. He hadn't found the business account. Either he didn't know it existed or hadn't reached that step yet. Walt installed the new locks himself, efficient and precise. Front door, back door, garage side entrance. 40 minutes total. He handed me the new keys, took the old hardware to his truck. Old keys won't turn anymore, he said. If he has copies, they're useless now. I tested each lock. The bolt slid clean and solid. The house smelled like my house again. Sandra Nguyen's office was on the 5th floor of a building off Willamette Street. Walt's recommendation was accurate. Her name appeared consistently in property dispute cases with favorable outcomes. And when I called at 8 in the morning and said my son-in-law stole my house, her receptionist put me on hold for 30 seconds and came back with a same-day appointment. I sat across her desk with the quitclaim deed, the emergency travel document, the police report from Cancun, a written statement from Walt about watching my son-in-law load boxes from my house 3 days after I'd left for the trip, and 61 photographs. She read the deed, made notes in the margin, read it a second time. A quitclaim deed is not a transfer on death deed, she said. These are two entirely different instruments under Oregon law. What you signed transfers ownership immediately and unconditionally. What he told you, it was a protective measure that activates only upon death, does not exist in this legal form. She set her pen down. Did you receive a copy of what you signed? No. Did you read the document in full before signing? He presented it on a laptop screen. Small text. He scrolled through it quickly and described what he said it contained. Did you understand you were transferring present ownership of your property? I understood I was signing a medical planning document. He used the phrase transfer on death explicitly. He said it would only activate if I was gone. She wrote something, underlined it twice. That's our foundation. Fraudulent misrepresentation of a legal document's nature and effect. She looked up. I need to be direct. The deed is properly executed. Your signature is genuine. The notarization appears legitimate on its face. If we cannot prove you were deceived about what you were signing, the deed stands. The notary signed it the day after I did. I wasn't there for the notarization. Her pen stopped moving. I only signed once, I said. At my kitchen table, on an electronic pad. Whatever notarization happened, I wasn't present for it. She put down her pen entirely. A notary is required to witness the signature in person. If the notarization occurred separately from the signing, that's a procedural violation that may be sufficient to invalidate the entire instrument. She asked for a retainer of $4,000. I wrote the check, asked for honest numbers on the full case. If it settles, $10,000 to $15,000 total. If it goes to full hearing, $30,000 to $50,000. More if he's willing to fight hard. She met my eyes. Your son-in-law will be served with these papers. He'll know you're back. He'll know you're fighting. Good. I want him to know. She had the motion to invalidate filed within 48 hours. Sandra's paralegal, a thorough woman named Diane, spent 3 days pulling financial records through public filings and court databases. She brought her findings to a meeting at the end of the second week. My son-in-law owed $58,000 across 4 creditors, 2 credit cards maxed and in collections, 1 personal loan in default since the previous spring, 1 gambling-related debt to a private creditor who had filed a civil suit 7 months ago and received a judgment against him. 7 months ago. That was when he began planning this. Diane had assembled a timeline from public records and metadata from emails my son-in-law sent to 3 real estate agents, requests for property valuations on my address. Sent in January, 2 months before he'd brought the laptop to my kitchen table. All 3 responses came back between $760,000 and $800,000. He had priced my home before he'd asked me to sign anything. The debt was the motive. The house was the solution. My daughter was, I believed, genuinely the unknowing vehicle. A wife who knew they were in financial trouble but didn't know the shape of what her husband had constructed. She called on the 9th day, one day before they were due home. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Dad. Her voice was quiet and careful. Are you home? I've been home 6 days. Silence. I need you to know I didn't know he'd taken your things at the airport. He told me you'd arranged to fly back separately, that you'd had an argument and wanted space. A slight break in her voice. I should have called you. I should have questioned it. I know that. Did you know about the deed? A longer silence. I knew we needed to do something about the money situation. He told me he'd talk to you about estate planning. I thought. She stopped. I didn't ask enough questions, Dad. No, I said. You didn't. I didn't say anything else. Neither did she for a moment. Then she said she was sorry. I told her I knew. I hung up. She was my daughter. I loved her. Neither of those things changed what had happened or what I had to do next. The truck appeared in my driveway that afternoon. I was in the kitchen. I waited by the window and watched my son-in-law get out, stand in the driveway, look at my truck in the garage and the light in the kitchen window. I watched him process what those things meant. I watched his face cycle through confusion, then recalculation, then something that had no name but that I recognized. My daughter got out of the passenger side, took his arm. I opened the front door. You're back early, I said. I've been waiting. My son-in-law stepped forward. He recovered quickly. I gave him that. Dad, thank God you're safe. We were so worried. What happened at the airport? We looked everywhere. Stop. He stopped. I held the door wide enough for them both to see through to the coffee table, the quitclaim deed in its clear sleeve, Sandra's motion to invalidate beside it, the police report from Cancun beneath that. The document on that table is a motion filed with the court to invalidate the quitclaim deed you had me sign. The one you told me was a transfer on death deed. I kept my voice level. You know the difference between those 2 instruments. You counted on me not knowing. My daughter's hand fell from his arm. That deed is legal, he said. The warmth in his voice was gone now, something flatter underneath it. Your signature, your notarization. My attorney has reviewed it. Your attorney can explain to the court why the notarization occurred the day after the signing, without my presence, and why you paid the notary $250 cash for a service that typically costs $20, and why you contacted 3 real estate agents in January asking for market valuations on my address 2 months before you brought that laptop to my table. He didn't answer. The police report is from Cancun. It names you. Theft of identification, wallet, and cell phone at the airport. There's a separate report from Eugene PD, theft of personal property from a residence. My father's guitar, my wife's jewelry, my grandfather's watch. I pulled out my phone, the replacement I'd bought 2 days after getting home. This conversation is being recorded. Oregon is a 2-party consent state, and I'm informing you now. Everything said from this point is documented. He looked at my daughter. She wasn't looking at him. We need to leave, he said to her. She didn't move. He said her name. She looked at the deed on the coffee table, looked at me. Then she turned and walked back toward the truck without speaking. He followed, didn't look back. The truck reversed out of the driveway and was gone. I closed the door. The new lock engaged, solid and clean. Walt called 20 minutes later. He'd been on his porch. They left, he said. They left. You all right? Ask me in a month. The legal counter-response came 4 days later. My son-in-law had hired a property attorney named Phil Brennan, who filed a counter-motion, arguing the deed was a valid gift, properly executed, and that my current claim was motivated by a family disagreement rather than genuine fraud. He was separating the criminal conduct from the property case, making the theft and the abandonment look like a family conflict rather than evidence of premeditated intent. Sandra read me the filings over the phone. Her voice was steady. It's a reasonable strategy. It simplifies his argument. But we have the notary. She'd found him. A part-time notary named Barry Croft, who worked out of his home in the Bethel neighborhood, tracked through the county notary registry. Barry Croft had notarized my quitclaim deed the day after my signature at a meeting that did not include me, at a location that was not his registered office address. He agreed to a meeting. Barry Croft was 51, heavy-set, apologetic in the way of someone who had been apologizing internally for months, and was relieved to finally do it out loud. He sat in Sandra's conference room and described the arrangement without much prompting. My son-in-law had contacted him through a mutual acquaintance at a gym. Said the notarization was routine elderly father-in-law, estate documents. Just wanted it handled conveniently. Offered $250 cash. Barry thought the amount seemed high, but he needed the money. They met at a coffee shop on Chambers Street, not his office. "You weren't there," Barry said, looking at me. I asked where you were. He said you'd already signed and were at a doctor's appointment. He said you had mobility issues and couldn't make it out. He shifted in his chair. "When I got there, you seemed perfectly healthy. You walked in fine, ordered your own coffee. I asked if everything was all right, and he cut me off, said you had somewhere to be afterward. Let's keep it moving." He folded his hands. "I notarized a signature I hadn't witnessed. That's not how it's supposed to work. I knew it then. I did it anyway." Sandra prepared his sworn statement that afternoon. A week later, Diane found my things. A storage facility on Roosevelt Boulevard, a unit rented in my son-in-law's name 2 months before the trip. The search warrant was executed by Eugene PD based on the police report and the supporting evidence Sandra had filed. An officer called me that afternoon. My father's guitar was in a padded case in the corner of the unit. One tuning peg was slightly bent, as if it had been set down too hard, but the instrument was otherwise intact. Eleanor's pearl set was in a zippered bag. The pocket watch was wrapped in a sock. The silver dollars were still in the original wooden box. 17 items total, every one I'd photographed and reported. I drove to the evidence facility 2 days later. A young officer carried out a plastic bin marked with my case number. I signed for each item, carried the bin to my truck, sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. I took the guitar out of its case in my driveway, tuned it standing on the front porch in the afternoon light, the bent peg stiff but workable. When I played a G chord, the resonance was exactly what I remembered from sitting on the living room floor at age 7, watching my father play. I carried it inside and hung it back on the bracket in the study. The hearing was on a Thursday in early November. Lane County Courthouse, 4th floor, Judge Thomas Wakefield presiding. Sandra had submitted everything: the financial desperation timeline, the realtor emails from January, the police reports, Barry Croft's sworn statement, Diane's research, the full chronology of planning. My son-in-law's attorney, Phil Brennan, was polished. His opening framed everything as a family gift that had unraveled a generous son-in-law helping an aging father-in-law with estate planning, now accused of fraud by a man who'd changed his mind. Sandra's opening was shorter. "Your Honor, the plaintiff will demonstrate that the defendant deliberately misrepresented the nature and legal effect of the document the plaintiff signed. The notarization was performed in violation of standard protocols, without the signatory present, by a notary paid 12 times the normal rate. And the defendant had contacted real estate agents requesting property valuations on the plaintiff's home 2 months before the signing, before his father-in-law knew any document was being prepared. This was not estate planning. This was theft with a pen." Wakefield was in his early 60s, known according to Sandra for thoroughness and low tolerance for procedural maneuvering. He listened to both sides without expression. I testified for 40 minutes. Sandra walked me through the signing, the trip, the airport. Brennan cross-examined aggressively. "You signed willingly. You're a capable businessman. You've been managing legal and financial documents for decades." "I understood I was signing a medical planning document," I said each time he pressed. He used the phrase "transfer on death" explicitly and repeatedly. He said it would only activate if I was gone. I did not understand. I was transferring present ownership of my home to him. Barry Croft testified. His voice was steady. He described the coffee shop, the cash payment, the absent signatory, and the instructions to keep things moving. My son-in-law testified under Brennan's direct examination, calm, carefully maintaining his account. Sandra cross-examined. You paid $250 for a notarization that typically costs $20. Why? Barry was doing us a favor, coming to us rather than requiring my father-in-law to travel. But Mr. Briggs wasn't present at that meeting. He'd already signed. We just needed the notarization handled. So your father-in-law signed a legal document transferring his property without a notary witness present? A pause. Which means the notarization was performed on a signature the notary didn't witness. That's not legal notarization. Brennan objected. Wakefield allowed the exchange to stand. When the realtor emails were entered into evidence, 3 agents contacted in January, 2 months before the signing, requesting market valuations on my address. My son-in-law's composure slipped slightly. He glanced at Brennan. Brennan kept his eyes on his notes. Wakefield reviewed the financial records, the gambling debt judgment, the creditor suit filed 7 months before the trip, the timeline. The ruling came at the end of the afternoon session. The court finds by preponderance of evidence that the quitclaim deed was procured through fraudulent misrepresentation. The plaintiff was told he was signing a transfer on death instrument. The document he signed was legally and functionally different. He did not have the opportunity to understand what he was actually signing. Wakefield looked up from his notes. The notarization is also found procedurally deficient. The defendant's testimony contained material inconsistencies. The deed is hereby declared null and void. Title remains with Harold Briggs. He set down his pen. I'm referring the criminal theft matters to the Lane County District Attorney's Office for review. I drove home in November rain. The house was lit from inside. I'd left the lights on, the same way I had when I was waiting by the window for them to pull into the driveway. I sat in my own driveway for a minute, not celebrating, just breathing. The district attorney's office called 3 weeks later. An assistant prosecutor named Kevin Park, soft-spoken and organized. Mr. Briggs, we're offering your son-in-law a plea agreement. 1 count of theft in the 2nd degree. 18 months probation, restitution covering your documented legal costs. 200 hours community service, no jail time, given no prior record, but a permanent conviction on his record. I thought about it, thought about the difference between punishment and accountability, thought about what Eleanor would have said, which was that I should act like the kind of person she believed I was. A permanent conviction that follows him, background checks, professional licensing, future property transactions. It will follow him, yes. Accept the plea. A short pause. Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Some victims push for maximum sentences. I respect that you're thinking about what's proportional. Proportional. The word felt right. Enough to mark what happened without becoming the thing I spent the rest of my life around. My daughter and I spoke twice in November. Careful conversations. She had filed for divorce and told me herself, not wanting me to hear it elsewhere. She was staying with a friend in Portland, figuring out what came next. She was sorry in a way that sounded like she'd been carrying it for a long time. I told her she was still my daughter, that the door was open to her when she was ready. I didn't tell her things were fine between us, because they weren't yet. But the door was open, and that was true. And it was the most honest thing I could offer. She said thank you. We hung up. It was a beginning. I met with an estate attorney in mid-December and set up a new trust. Properly. Me, present for every signature. Printed copies in hand. Every page read before I touched the pen. Updated my will with explicit language. The house, my house, the one Eleanor and I had spent 40 years filling with a life, would pass to a local land trust that built affordable housing for elderly residents on fixed incomes. Eleanor had volunteered for them in her 50s. It seemed right. Walt came over the evening after I filed the new documents. He brought a bottle of scotch. He said he'd been saving for something. We sat on the front porch in the December cold, wool blankets over our knees, drinking slowly. The street was quiet. Neighbors' houses lit from inside. Normal December evenings unfolding behind ordinary windows. You won, Walt said. I kept what was mine. Same thing. I thought about it. Watched a car pass slowly, headlights sweeping across the wet pavement. Not quite the same. Winning means you got something new. I just didn't lose what I already had. He considered that. Poured another measure into each glass. Eleanor would have put that better. She always did. We sat without talking for a while. The porch light made a small, warm circle around us. Beyond it, her garden still more hers than mine, though I'd tended it through 2 winters, now waited under frost for spring. The guitar was on the wall in the study, tuned and in its place. The pearl set was back in its velvet tray. The pocket watch ticked in its glass case in the living room. The house smelled like coffee and wood smoke, and the cedar planks I'd installed in the hallway closet the summer I retired. Like a house lived in for 20 years by someone who intended to go on living in it. I'd heard from a neighbor down the block that my son-in-law had relocated out of state. New address, new start, a permanent conviction following him like a shadow he'd have to explain for the rest of his life. I didn't feel satisfied by that. I'd expected to, and I didn't. What I felt was something quieter, the particular kind of peace that comes not from having won, but from having refused to lose. Walt went home around 9. I stayed on the porch another half hour, listening to the neighborhood settle into night. My phone sat on the table beside me. No calls pending, no reason for calls. My life had no urgent matters, no court dates, no attorneys, no police reports requiring follow-up, just the ordinary accumulation of ordinary days, which is what I'd been fighting for, without fully understanding it, until I'd come close enough to losing it, to know what it was worth. Tomorrow, I'd plant the winter bulbs I'd bought at the nursery 3 weeks ago and not gotten around to. Eleanor always did them in October. I'd been slow, but they'd bloom in the spring either way. Some things are patient. They wait for you to tend to them when you're ready. I looked at my house one more time. Pale yellow trim, dark gray siding, the porch I rebuilt the year we turned 30 years in this place together, paid off long ago. Mine. I went inside, locked the door behind me with my key. The house was warm. The guitar was on the wall. I turned off the porch light and went to bed in my own home, on my own terms, for the 38th year in a row. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for being here.